Back when I was in college for my junior year, I was getting an apartment. I needed a roommate but did not know who to live with. All my friends already had living situations figured out. I was unable to live with any of them, which disappointed me. But a big part of it was that I could not afford it. I found an apartment in a good location sort of late. I contacted a few friends that I would want to live with, but none of them were able to live with me. They already had plans of where they were going to live. So I posted a Snapchat story telling how I needed a roommate. The college I went to was very large, and over my 2 years there to that point, I had made many friends. I probably had 100 to 200 people from college on my Snapchat as friends, so I was hoping that something would work out. One girl responded to it though. Her name was Claire and I barely knew her. She was not in any of my groups of friends at all. I had one class with her during my freshman year and did a group project that she was in. That's how I got her Snapchat. I literally hadn't seen her or talked to her since the project. But she said that she too needed a place to live and said that she would be willing to get an apartment with me. I had no other people offering, so I ended up saying yes and we agreed to become roommates. The apartment we moved into was just off campus and it was pretty nice. It had 2 bedrooms, so we each had our own room. Things started out normal. We were not best friends, but we were friendly with each other and I liked living there. Our bedrooms were next to each other down the hallway and off the living room and kitchen. Every night when I would go to bed, I would close my bedroom door. I remember that one morning I woke up and the door was wide open. This was strange because I was sure that I had closed it the previous night. However, I didn't know 100% for sure, so I didn't say anything about it. But probably a couple of nights later, it was wide open again. I knew for a fact that time that I had closed it before, so I was really confused. To me, the only explanation was that Claire had opened the door, because she was the only person living there. Still, I didn't say anything to her. The next night, I decided to lock my bedroom door when I went to sleep. Our doors did have locks on them, but I hadn't felt the need to lock the door because I didn't think Claire would be opening it or anything. After locking the door, the crazy thing is that night I woke up to the sound of the doorknob rattling. Somebody was trying to get in. I figured Claire. I groggily woke up more and the rattling stopped. I thought about calling out and asking who was there, but I did not, and the noises stopped. So then I just went back to sleep. In the morning when I got up, I brought it up to Claire. She acted surprised about it and asked if someone had broken in or something. I said that I didn't think so, because nothing was stolen and the door was still locked. Plus, all the windows were fine. I asked Claire if it was her, and she said no. I also asked if she ever sleepwalked, thinking that it would be a logical explanation, but she said no, she never did. This was really suspicious to me, but I just said whatever and then moved on. Claire didn't seem too concerned about it, which was concerning to me. I couldn't think of why she would do these things though. It was my thought that maybe she was sleepwalking and just didn't know it. A couple of nights later, I once again woke up to the sound of someone trying to open my bedroom door. Now, as soon as I heard it, I was wide awake this time and not sleepy like before. My floor was carpet and I instantly got up and quietly went over to the door. I couldn't hardly see anything because all the lights in the entire apartment were off, but my TV was on the home screen which provided a tiny bit of light. I quickly walked over to the door and opened it. When I did, it was even darker out there, so I barely saw anything. But I did see someone quickly turning away and running off. This person did resemble Claire, but they were wearing all black, including a ski mask. Plus, it was so dark that I couldn't say 100% that it was her. But I didn't have any time to say anything at all. She ran away and then opened the front door to the apartment and left entirely. I was so confused and also creeped out. I went over to the door and opened it and looked out, but I saw nothing as whoever was there had already ran far away. Then I went over to Claire's room and knocked on the door. It was closed and I tried to open it, but the door was locked. I banged on it and got no answer, so I called the police. Either my roommate was playing the worst prank ever on me or somebody had broken into our apartment. The cops got there a while later and looked around both inside and outside the apartment. They knocked on Claire's door a bunch, but she never answered, and I assumed she was gone. They said they were not going to break the door down or force her to answer if she was there, because apparently they had no authority to do that in that particular situation or something. So the cops left, and I also texted and called Claire a bunch, as it appeared as though her phone was turned off. I stayed up for the rest of the night as I could not sleep. Claire never showed up, either from her bedroom or elsewhere. Eventually, I had to go to class. I got a text after my first class of the day. It was from Claire, and she said she was sorry she didn't respond right away, but she had to go in early to her work-study job. I wasn't buying that, but I didn't accuse her. Instead, I told my parents about what happened. They helped me out, and I was able to get out of the lease on the apartment and find another place to live alone. I haven't spoken to Claire since I moved out. I know that it was her doing those things, but I can't prove it, and I don't know why she would do that. This happened a couple of years ago. I used to live in an apartment that was decently nice, and I rented it with my roommate who I will call JT. Well, unfortunately, JT got a better job that required him to move away. JT and I were not good friends, but we were cool with each other. When he moved, I understood why, obviously, but I also could not afford the place on my own, so we had to get out of the lease. JT did pay the cancellation fee, but I had a short notice of like 1 month to find a new place to live, so I ended up going online and pretty much finding a random roommate. I didn't want to do it, but I had to. With my job and the city that I was living in at the time, it was either get a roommate or live in a complete dump, and I lived in a really crappy place in the past and did not want to do it again. So I was able to find a roommate. It seemed a little sketchy to find a random person online to live with, but I figured it should be fine. The roommate I found was a guy named Leonard. For the most part, he seemed normal. He didn't really seem like a guy that I would be good friends with, but that didn't matter. All I cared about was that he paid rent, was not a jerk, and did not wreck the place. The place that we found to live was a townhome, and it was older, but not too bad. The space that Leonard and I had was a living room, kitchen, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms, one for each of us. After moving in, things seemed to otherwise go pretty well. I would be at work a lot, and so would Leonard. Most of the time, we would hang out in our rooms. But I noticed that Leonard would be gone quite a bit, and he would be gone at all hours of the day and night. I didn't really ask him about it and didn't really care that much, but it did seem a little bit odd. For example, I would sometimes hear him leaving at 11 p.m. or midnight, sometimes later, and he would be gone for a long time, but he would normally be back the following morning. Other times he would leave and I wouldn't see him for days. He never left an explanation though, which was weird because we did talk on a fairly regular basis. And when he went to visit family out of town once, he did tell me about that. Also, his job was not one where he would work crazy hours. They were pretty normal. One time was really weird though. I was at home one night and Leonard got back after me. I happened to be in the kitchen when he arrived home and we said hi to each other. Then he went into his room and shut the door. I went back to my room, but only like 20 minutes later, I remembered that I wanted to ask Leonard a question about the Wi-Fi. So I walked over to his room and knocked on the door, but there was no answer. This was strange because he had just gone into his room and I hadn't heard him leave. I knocked again. I guess he could have been sleeping or something, but for some reason I just opened the door. When I did, he was not in the room. It was completely empty. I closed the door and then wondered where he had gone. He was not in the bathroom or any other room. I just went back to my room feeling like I had gone crazy. Then, like 10 minutes after that, there was a knock on my bedroom door. I answered it to see Leonard there, and he said that he had heard me knocking on his door earlier, but he had fallen asleep. I played it off and said that was fine and I didn't mean to wake him up, and then I asked him about the Wi-Fi like I wanted to before. After that, he went back to his room. But I knew that he had not been sleeping because I had looked in his room and he wasn't there. Where had he come from? I was very confused by the whole thing. Things seemed kind of strange for the next couple of weeks. Leonard was gone all the time at odd hours and stuff. I just tried to ignore it. One time though, he was gone for like 2 days in a row. One of those days, I got curious. His door was closed, but I opened it. When I saw it in his room, it looked pretty normal. I walked inside and looked around. I think I was just curious and I guess a bit nosy. I noticed something. At the closet in the corner of his room was sort of a ladder. I walked over to it and saw that there was a trap door in the ceiling. I hadn't even noticed it, but I guess it led to the attic. I didn't have access to that in my room. By this point, I was just curious as to what was in the attic, not even trying to pry into Leonard's stuff. So I walked up the steps and opened the attic door. When I looked up there, it was completely dark. I took out my phone and used a flashlight. There wasn't much space up there, but there were a ton of duffel bags. In the corner, I saw a huge stack of cash as well. I left the attic quickly and went back down and then ran back to my room. I didn't see or hear from Leonard for several more days after that. Then there was a knock on the door one night, and it was the cops. It turns out Leonard was a drug dealer. He got caught and the cops came in and took all his stuff. I ended up moving out of that place shortly after. That was definitely a crazy situation. When I was younger, I had a few roommates. All of my college years except for one, I had roommates, and then the first few years out of college as well. At one point, I lived in a house with another woman who was around my age. Her name was Allison, and I actually worked with her, and that's how we met. We were coworkers and sort of became friends. However, she ended up changing jobs. Now, the two of us were never that close, and never best friends or anything. I always thought that she seemed a little odd, and I'm not just saying that. We remained in touch a little on social media and text, and she lived in the same city as me. So when I needed a new place, she happened to be looking as well, and we decided to get a place together. Allison told me that there was a place that she was interested in, and she would send me all the details. When she did, I got the information, and I thought that it was a good situation. The place was pretty expensive, and it looked okay, but I could afford it, so I agreed. It was a house, and it was small, but it had 2 floors and a basement, and the neighborhood was decent. We each had a bedroom upstairs, and the rent was $1,200 a month each. I had not lived in the area long at all, so I didn't know much about the other prices because I hadn't looked yet. So we moved in, and we each had a bedroom upstairs. Allison really organized everything, and she even met with the landlord when I was at work to get the keys and stuff. I got the Wi-Fi and she would pay me for it, but then she would pay for the rent and I would pay her for it. Living there, things went pretty well. Alice and I got along good, and we both took care of the house and were gone a lot for our jobs. I remember that after living there for like 6 months, our landlord came over for an inspection. I'm not sure why, but he had to come into the place to look around and stuff. When he came over, Allison was gone, but I was home. The landlord entered the house and said hi and asked how living there was going and stuff. I told him that it was going well, and we chit-chatted for a bit. Then he started looking around and asking if things were working well, like the sinks and heat and AC. All that kind of stuff. Everything was good. Then when he got upstairs to our rooms, he noticed how Allison's room was kind of a lot larger than mine. I had known that her room was bigger, but I had never been in Allison's room, as she would always have the door closed when she was in there, as well as when she was away, and I never thought to go in or anything. When the landlord brought up how her room was a lot larger, he asked if I paid less in rent. I said no, we both pay $1,200. He then corrected me and said, "You mean $600." I was confused until he told me that the total rent for the house was $1,200 a month. It was then that I realized that Allison was scamming me. I told him how she said it was $1,200 each, and that's what I had been paying her. He said that we needed to figure it out and she might be trying to steal from me, because the rent was a total of $1,200, not $1,200 each. It was supposed to be $600 each. So I was essentially paying the total rent and she was living there for free. Plus she had the larger bedroom. I was so mad. The landlord soon left. When Allison got back that day, I told her about it. At first she claimed that the landlord must have been confused or mistaken. But when I pressed her with more details, she just ran away to her bedroom and locked the door behind her. I was furious, but decided I would handle it the next day, as she clearly wasn't coming out of the room. The following morning when I got up, Allison was gone. And all her stuff was gone too. She had moved out in the middle of the night. After that, I lived there on my own. I contacted the landlord and reported it. He said Allison informed him that she was moving out, and she tried to say that it was because I was refusing to pay the rent. However, he knew what really happened. He ended up being nice to me and giving me a discount for the final few months I lived there by myself, and he charged a fee to Allison for breaking the lease, I think. Either way, I never saw her again. I suppose I could have sued her or something, but I never thought to do that. I blocked her on everything, and I still can't believe how she scammed me. This happened years ago when I was younger. So I was looking for a new place to live and did not have a ton of money. I knew that I needed a roommate in order to get a decent place. However, I was moving to a new city for work and did not know anybody. The plan was to have a roommate for maybe a year until I could afford a place on my own. Not knowing how else to get a roommate, I turned to the internet and Craigslist. I posted an ad with the town I was looking to live in, saying that I was looking for a roommate. I made it clear in the ad that I was a female and I wanted to live with another female and preferably around my age. So the first person to respond to my ad was this guy. He said that he wanted to be my roommate and get a place with me. When he told me his name, it was Michael, which I asked to confirm that he was a man, and he said yes. I told him I was only looking to live with another woman, so I would not be interested, but he continued to text me. He tried to say that it wasn't a big deal and he wouldn't bother me and stuff. I told him no again and then started to ignore him. However, this guy continued to text me. He was asking why I was ignoring him and saying that he really needed a place to live and stuff like that. I could not believe how much he was texting. It was like 3 times a day for the next few days. I was still just ignoring him and thinking that eventually he would give it up. Within a week, I was able to find an actual roommate, another woman around my age. We ended up meeting and getting the apartment that I mentioned in the ad where I was looking to live. Meanwhile, Michael was still texting me, so I blocked his number. I thought that was the end of it, and I didn't hear anything for a while. But one day, literally like a week after moving in, I was at home at the apartment by myself. It was sometime in the afternoon, and my roommate was still gone at work. There was a knock at the door, and I went over and looked out of the peephole. Some guy was standing there who I didn't know. I thought it was a neighbor or something, and I opened the door and answered it. When I did, the guy said that he was Michael, and he asked if I still needed a roommate. I said no, and then quickly slammed the door shut and locked it. Michael tried opening the door, and he kept knocking on it. He kept asking me to open the door. I just ignored it. I didn't say anything. Eventually, he left after probably like 20 minutes. After that, I told myself that if he ever showed up again, I was calling the cops. But thankfully, he never did. I never saw him or heard from him. I'm not quite sure how he found me, though. My best guess is that he found me on social media, as he knew my first name, the city I lived in, as well as the apartment I wanted to get. But really, I don't know. It was very weird. When I was in college as a freshman, I lived in the dorms and I got assigned a random roommate by the university. The dorm rooms were pretty small, but standard for most places. There was just a bed, desk, and a shelf on each side of the room. So we each had our own side. My roommate was a guy named Sam, and when we first met, I thought that he was cool. He seemed nice for the most part, and we talked a bit. I thought that things were going to work out good and we would become friends. For the first couple of weeks, things were going well. Sam and I would sometimes hang out, and we would talk quite a bit. Eventually, strange things started happening around the dorms. One time, I was in the bathroom taking a shower. Our dorm had a bathroom in the hallway that basically had like 8 doors in it, each leading to a small private bathroom. In the middle, outside all those doors, was just an open area with some sinks. Normally, there would always be a few doors open. I don't think I ever saw all the doors closed. So, as I was taking a shower on this day, out of nowhere someone started trying to open the door to the one that I was in over and over. I was confused because I was sure that there were other bathrooms available. I yelled saying that I was in there, but they kept trying to open the door. Then it stopped and they went away. Maybe a few days after that, I was in my dorm room doing homework. It was sometime in the afternoon and Sam was gone, so I was by myself. Out of nowhere, someone started banging super loud on the door. It was like they were banging on it as hard as they could. I got up to see who was there, but they ran away and were gone by the time I looked out, so I couldn't tell who had done it. The same thing happened again the next day. I was in the room and there were some loud bangs on the door, and when I got up to look, they were gone. Then I remembered that I went down to the study room in the dorm building to do some work late at night. I didn't want to bother Sam because it was like midnight and I still had work to do, so I was by myself in the study room that we had. I remember that as I was in there, suddenly all the lights shut off and it was completely dark. I looked around but could not see anything at all. I thought that maybe the power had gone out, but I didn't know why because it wasn't storming or anything. After making my way over to the light switch, I turned it back on and realized that the power was not out. Somebody had turned off the lights on me. The door to the room was open and my back was facing it, so it would be easy for somebody to do so without me noticing. Someone was messing with me, it seemed, and it was really creeping me out. I went back to the room and went to bed at that point. The next day, I told Sam all the crazy things that were happening, and he was like, "Wow, that's crazy." The odd occurrences didn't stop, though. There were more random knocks on the door, both in the dorm room when I was alone and when I was in the bathroom. One time, I came back to the dorm to see that somebody put a bunch of peanut butter on the doorknob, completely covering it. It was gross. I was seriously considering moving dorms. But the final straw was when we got black mold in our dorm room. I had a mini fridge in the dorm that I brought, and it was actually under my bed because my bed was sort of high above the ground. There was a blanket that I wasn't using, and I was unaware that it somehow got on top of the fridge and was draped along the back of the fridge as well. With the condensation and how close the fridge backed up to the wall, the blanket created a bunch of mold that was on the wall and the blanket as well. It was disgusting. So when that happened, I reported it and Sam and I had to move. Except I requested to move to a different dorm because of all the strange things. Thankfully, my request was granted. I moved away from Sam and got a new roommate. Well, not long after this happened, I heard from a mutual friend at school something interesting. He said that Sam told him he was the one messing with me, and he did all that because he wanted me to move out. Sam was laughing about it as if he was proud. He had knocked on the door all those times, and he had turned off the lights on me, and it was even he who deliberately put the blanket on the fridge to cause the mold. All that because he apparently hated living with me that much, and didn't want to just simply tell me that he wanted to move out or request a new room. But I don't think it was just that he didn't like me. I think he liked messing with me and it was fun for him. I think he's a total psychopath. I texted him about it and he denied it. But I told him that he's lucky I don't report him to the dean, and as long as I never saw him again, I would not report it. For the rest of my college career, I never did see him again. Many years ago, I had just started my freshman year of college. I was going to a college out of my home state, and I knew no one that was going to the same school as me, which meant I was going to be rooming with a total stranger. When I met my roommate, she seemed nice enough, and her parents seemed nice enough as well. Everything was going fine for the first couple of weeks, but then some odd habits began emerging. I noticed that every time I would sit at my desk, she would move from wherever she was to sit on the floor behind me. Every single time. The first few times I thought it was just coincidental, because it happened when she would just be entering the room from her last classes. I thought that maybe she just wanted to relax by sitting on the floor. Then the other scenarios began happening. She had a beanbag sitting right by my desk, so close that it was touching it, and it was her favorite spot. She always sat there to do homework and whatnot. If I decided I wanted to sit at my desk, she would move from the beanbag to the floor behind me. Sometimes she would even abandon her homework to sit behind me. I didn't sit at my desk too often for that reason. My roommate had a job that started at 8 a.m. every weekday, which means I typically got woken up early, which was fine. I usually just rolled over and tried to get some extra sleep. A few times, though, I had woken up to her staring at me. One time, she was a foot away from my bed, just staring. She also made a point to look at me when she left, but it didn't end there. Other people's hair generally disgusts me. I don't like touching it or seeing it on my things. My roommate had long curly red hair. One day I decided to wash my sheets. I don't even sleep under the sheets. I'll either sleep with only a throw blanket or only my comforter. So I never go under my sheets, but I lay on top of them, so they still deserve to be washed. When I pulled back the sheet, I was met with strings of my roommate's long curly red hair. I have no clue how it got there, and I'm not sure if I want to know. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, my roommate and I shared the same class together. When class ended, she would sit there and wait for me to pack up my notebooks and things, and then we would walk back to our dorm room together. That by itself is normal, but here's the strange part. She never tried to talk to me. She would just walk like 2 feet behind me. By itself, it seemed kind of normal, but with everything else, it just sort of felt like she was watching me. She never did any physical harm towards me, but the whole semester was a little unnerving to me. I ended up getting a new roommate for the next semester. I wasn't allowed to switch rooms mid-semester, but I was able to get a new roommate for the following one. The rest of that school year, though, I still caught my first roommate staring at me in the cafeteria and student lounges, and she would sit eerily close to me and my friends. Thankfully, I never had to see her again, because I ended up transferring to a different college after that year to be closer to home. We lived in the main floor suite of an old 4-story house. One day, the guy who lived in the basement suite underneath us started a fire which burnt a total of 7 tenants out of our homes. We escaped barefoot in our pajamas with our cat in her carrier. We got put up in a motel for 3 days and had meals provided. The motel we stayed at was a series of cute little white bungalows rather than a single building with rooms. Like a lot of motels, it serves as low-income accommodation to longer-term tenants, as well as crisis accommodation for refugees and people displaced by house fires. Upon arrival, we found that our suite had a kitchen, bath, and main room with a queen bed and television. We were a little surprised to discover that there was a room at the end of a long hallway towards the back of the suite. It was another queen bed with 2 side tables and a lamp on one of them. It also had a closet. Upon discovering the room, I opened the door, looked around, and felt a strong urge to not be in there and wanted to shut the door again. First, I had to cross the room to turn off the bedside lamp. I guess the motel staff had left it on for us. We agreed that we would be sleeping in the front room and would not need to go into that back room again. We arrived at the motel in the morning, only a few hours after the fire. Our traumatized cat remained curled up in her carrier next to the bed the whole day, not leaving to eat, drink, or visit her little box. We had opened all the windows in the suite to air it out, except the one in the room that we would not be using. Later, when we went around to shut all the windows, I knew we hadn't opened the one in the back room to begin with, but I decided to check it anyways as it was a ground level window and I wanted to be sure that it was locked before we went to bed. Checking the window did require crossing the entire room again, as the window was adjacent to the table with the lamp. Once the window was secured, I turned to leave and noticed the lamp on the bedside table was on. I think I would have noticed if my husband had gone into the room for any reason, but maybe not, so I just turned it off and left. I asked my husband if he had turned on the lamp. He said no. I became nervous and pressed him, so he changed the no to an I'm not sure. We were scheduled to stay at the motel for 3 nights. Fortunately, we had some friends who were on vacation, and they said that we could stay in their place while they were gone, but it would be a couple of days before they left, so we had to wait it out at the motel. The walls were thin, and our little bungalow was a 4-plex. We could hear the muffled voice of the neighbor on the other side of the wall. We also heard the outside voices of people mingling on the lawns. I laid awake all night. At some point, probably in the very early hours of the morning, I heard a male voice over my right shoulder say, "Hey." I was startled as I thought someone had come in. By this time, I knew what voices carried from next door and outside sounded like. I also know what my husband sounds like when he mutters in his sleep. This voice wasn't any of that. Anyhow, that was it for our first day. Nothing but a creepy room, a suspicious table lamp, and a dude saying hey in the night. On the second day, our cat left her carrier and patrolled the perimeter of the rooms, never venturing farther than halfway down the hallway. I don't blame her. If the bathroom door hadn't been halfway down the hall, neither of us would have ventured even that far. The weird feeling from that room started several feet before the door to the room. That night, our cat grew bolder and started exploring more space than just the perimeters. As we laid in bed trying to sleep on the second night, our cat was at the end of the hallway outside the creepy room making a fuss. She laid on her side with her nose pressed against the gap under the door, meowing constantly. She was reaching her paws under the gap and clawing at the bottom of the door. She did this for hours. It is a behavior that we've seen before when she's locked out of a room that we're all inside. We've learned not to close doors, even when we're using the restroom, because she hates being left out. A couple of times I ventured down the hallway to pick her up and bring her in for a snuggle, but she always went back. She has never behaved that way outside of a vacant room. The next day we got the keys to our friend's place and we didn't stay for our third night at the motel. I'm very glad our stay ended early, because I'm fairly certain that we had a roommate in there with us to stay. I wasn't looking forward to what would have happened on the third night, specifically regarding that strange room. This happened a few years ago. I was going through a difficult time, so I was looking for a new place to live without big commitments until I figured life out. I met this guy through a Craigslist posting. He said he had an apartment and was looking for a roommate. I got his name and number and called him. We set up a meeting at a public place for a meet and greet. Everything went seemingly fine and he agreed to show me the place. He seemed super nice and helpful and was easy to get along with. He was neat and his place seemed low maintenance. It didn't bother me that he was a guy. We agreed on no drugs, no parties, and no craziness terms. We agreed on monthly payments and I moved in a few weeks later. So it was 2 weeks after I started living there, when one day he came in early from work and had this very upset voice and claimed that we needed to talk. He said that I had been acting inappropriately by having my boyfriend stop by on occasion. The thing was that my boyfriend would not even stay to spend the night or anything like that. He would just drop by if he was in the area to see me for like 10 minutes and say hi every now and then. I began questioning my new roommate why it made him uncomfortable. and he just said that it made him feel uncomfortable because everybody at the apartment complex thought that I was his romantic partner. I was so furious and couldn't believe that that was his reason. It then escalated to a point where he said that the entire time he had known me, which was for like 2 weeks of very minimal interaction, he was convinced that I was possessed. He said that he could see it in my eyes. I knew at that point that I wasn't going to live there long term, and I began looking for a new place immediately to move into. I told him this, and he acted all calmly then, saying that I could take my time looking for a new place. I luckily found an apartment that I could move into and had planned to do it the very next day. I told my insane roommate that I was leaving tomorrow. The day of the move-out came, and I walked into the apartment to get my stuff. I walked into my room, and there were these creepy candles all lit. I picked up all my belongings and left. He sent a message to me later with, of course, something that had to do with he was hoping that I would face my sins and darkness. I have no idea what he meant. I blocked that guy's number after that, so who knows if he kept sending me the stuff. I didn't care to find out. I do trust people a lot less, and have never had a random roommate again, and thankfully never had another roommate again either, period. I was lucky enough to live in a large house when I was a kid. My house had a side room towards the back of the first floor. My siblings called it the second living room because that's basically what it was. It had an old recliner, a small table, and a mid-sized couch. That was it. We hardly ever sat in there. One morning, I woke up sick. I told my mom, and she told me to take the day off from school and to stay home. My siblings had to be at school, and my parents worked, so that meant that I had the house to myself. I laid around in bed for a few hours until around 10:30 a.m. when I heard steady walking coming from my first floor. I thought nothing of it at first, and I just assumed that maybe my mom went in late like she did sometimes. I needed something to eat anyways, so I stood up and went downstairs to the kitchen. I made it about 3 feet from the front of my kitchen's walk-in doorway when I locked my eyes with not my mom, but a 6-foot-tall man wearing raggy and ripped-up old clothes. I was frozen in fear. I just stood there. It was only for a few seconds, but it felt like hours had passed. The guy just stood there and watched me too, no expression or anything. I eventually pulled myself out of the shock and bolted to my bedroom upstairs. I didn't hear him follow me, but I got into my bedroom and locked the door and moved my dresser in front of it anyways. I pulled out my phone, and instead of calling 911 like I should have, I called my mom. I screamed into the phone telling her that somebody was in the house trying to kill me. She told me not to leave my room for any reason and to call the police, so I did. 15 minutes later, the police finally showed up, as I could see through my bedroom window. I watched them enter the house before I left my room to run down to them for safety. I told them everything that happened. They did a quick search of the home and found nothing. Not a single person or a broken window or door. My parents both came home shortly after, and we were absolutely furious that the guy was not caught. I was extremely angry as well, but also relieved that I was alive. The police began packing their things, but as one of the last officers was on the way out, he noticed a Walmart bag sticking out from under our couch. It was that couch in the side room. We found hundreds of trash bags and week-old rotting food under the couch, along with some other personal items like wipes, water bottles, and even a bag of urine. Whoever that man was in the kitchen, he had been living under our couch for weeks. I can't comprehend how none of my family members smelled the garbage that was piled up under the couch the entire time. The fact that he never made a single noise under there also baffles me. We've since cleaned that room out completely and turned it into an extra dining room area, so there's nowhere for unwanted roommates to hide anymore. When I was a freshman in college, I lived in the dorms, and I got a random roommate. I thought that it would work out fine, because I get along well with most people and make friends pretty easily. I figured that my roommate would probably get along with me as well, even if we didn't like the same things. Obviously, I hoped that he would have similar interests, and maybe we could become good friends, because I didn't really know anybody else at the university that I was going to at the time. Well, when I moved into the dorms, my roommate was not there. His name was Ryan, and his stuff was there, but I wasn't quite sure where he was. After my parents had helped me finish moving in all my stuff and left, Ryan was still nowhere in sight. In fact, he did not show up until the next day. It was when I got back from my first class and had a little bit of time left before my next one. When I entered the room, Ryan was just there, sitting at his desk and apparently doing homework. Ryan was about average height and weight, had glasses, and short blondish colored hair. Right away, he did not seem very friendly. When I entered the room, he turned and looked at me, but did not say hi or anything. Just as fast as he looked at me, he turned his head back to his desk. I said hi and walked over to him and stuck my hand out for a handshake. I remember he sort of hesitated, but did shake my hand. I had a brief conversation with him, asking him about himself. He was not a freshman like me, but a sophomore at the school, and he was from a small town several hours away. That was really all that I gathered. Soon, I went to my next class. After that, things only got more and more strange. Ryan was not often in his room, but when he was, I would sometimes try talking to him. He would usually give me very short answers and never ask me anything about myself. I thought maybe he was just shy or uncomfortable around other people, but at one point, he told me in a very stern way to stop talking to him and to not talk to him anymore. It was pretty rude, and I no longer felt like he was just a shy kid, but a kind of rude one. Still, I didn't want it to be a terrible semester, so I chose not to argue or anything. I decided to just let him be on his side of the room, and I would do my thing on my side. As the weeks went on, Ryan would be gone for sometimes days at a time. I would wake up and he would just be gone. Then when it would be nighttime, he still wouldn't be there, and I wouldn't see him for several days. Then, typically, he'd just walk into the room like nothing happened, or I'd come back and he'd already be there. I never bothered to ask him where he was though, knowing that he didn't want me talking to him. I remember at one point, on one of the days that he was at the dorm, he left sometime in the evening. Hours later, at probably like 11 o'clock at night or so, I remember I heard talking in the hallway. It got louder, and I realized that two guys were arguing. I recognized Ryan's voice to be one of them. He loudly told the guy to shut up, and a few seconds later, he walked into the room. I found out the next day that it was another guy who lived on our floor who he yelled at. Apparently, all the guy said to him was, "Hey, how's it going?" when they passed each other in the hallway. Ryan snapped at him immediately, telling him not to talk to him, which made the other guy angry. They argued briefly before Ryan walked away. I found this out because the other guy came up to me and told me that my roommate was really strange. That's when we had the conversation, and I was kind of creeped out by Ryan's erratic behavior. As the next few weeks went on, I was hoping to be able to get a new roommate when the next semester rolled around. In the meantime, I just ignored Ryan and he did the same to me. It really wasn't that bad because he was typically gone, so it was mostly like I had my own dorm to myself. You just never knew when Ryan would be back or how long he would be there. So one day, I remember that I got up and went to class. Ryan had been gone for the whole night and was still gone when I got up and left. I was away for several hours attending my classes. When I returned to the dorm room, I went inside to see everything on my side of the room just gone. It was the craziest thing that I'd ever seen. The bed, desk, and chair that came with the room were still there, but literally everything that I had was gone. My books, my blankets and pillows, clothes, snacks, and everything was nowhere in sight. Ryan's side of the room looked exactly the same, and Ryan was not there. I went inside the room and looked around, trying to figure out what happened. I was sure that I locked the door when I left, and I immediately suspected Ryan. I started to look on his side of the room. He really didn't have that much stuff to begin with. He really just had some clothes, a few blankets, and some notebooks. There was no place that he could have put all my things. After realizing that my stuff was definitely not in the room, I walked out into the hallway. I went to the resident assistant and told him what happened. We did a small investigation looking around the building, and soon we got in touch with campus security. Unfortunately, the dorm building was really old and did not have any security cameras inside of it. Luckily, I had made a few friends by that point in the school year. One had a dorm room all to himself, so I stayed in his spare bed for the next couple of nights. An investigation was done, and Ryan was nowhere to be seen. Several days later, though, my things were found. They were located a little ways into a woods just off campus. He had tossed all my stuff there. Ryan, meanwhile, did not show up for the entire rest of the semester. I was given a new dorm room all to myself by the school, and they also gave me a gift card to buy some new stuff, so that was nice. But as far as I'm aware, Ryan never showed up to campus again. I have no idea where he went. He was a very strange guy, but I'm glad that I didn't have to live with him any longer.